and it wasn't open to anybody else. And Rowan took this idea and changed the thought of it, changed the way it was situated, where before it was outside, it now became inside, where you had to have people funding it. You now had the owners themselves putting the cash into the ATM, which had the dual effect of saving the cost of funding the ATM and also allowed the owners of the ATM to have a place to put their cash. So it made it a lot safer for them. So it was an innovative thought process, but that wasn't where it started for Rowan. So as I said, together with Stephen Clark, he founded this. And just to show you how big it's become, it's now part of the Paycorp group. There are 6,000 ATMs globally. They partner with 11 different banks. It's in 8 different countries, and it's about 140 million transactions per annum. So from really small beginnings, this is massive, and from South Africa. But yeah, so it's a massive story. And this story, together with a number of different stories, was portrayed in a book which was put together by Shireen Richter of Expert Mavericks. So you can go back and read some of these stories. But Rowan didn't just start then with ATM solutions. And there's that term, the poster child. You're the poster child for something. And for me, Rowan was literally the poster child. Yeah. At the age of 10, in order to start a business, he went to theaters. And Rowan, you can expand on this.
No, so, I mean, when you put the poster child, I'm properly laughing at it because, obviously, I always felt that I was always looking to make some money, always trying to do something I came unfortunately from a poor family. My father passed away when I was very young.
Okay, so can I ask you I want to go into this just now.
Okay.
I just want to, Rowan actually, as he was explaining with the poster child, is he went after school and took posters, went to the theaters when they discarded the posters and sold that. And that was the age of 10. And he mentioned that his father passed away when he was very young. I think he was 2 years old even.
Yeah.
And kind of that sparked, I think, your thought process around not wanting to be poor. So when people ask him, how did you always dream to be rich? And he says, my dream was never to be rich, but rather not to be poor. And I think this is where Rowan's going to come in and start telling us the difference. It seems small, but it's subtle, but it's massive. So he went from 10-year-old selling posters to keep money, to make some money, to selling personal computers. It wasn't all successful. The business had to close down. It was defrauded in some way. Started another business, started ATM, which now, as you know, has become so big. And as you can see, Rowan has a flair for business. And in fact, we're interviewing him through Ort, but Rowan was involved in setting up Ort and all of this. So Rowan, sorry I interrupted you there as you started, but if you can just take us through those early days and take us through, why did you start doing it? Was it you just had a passion for posters, or was it a necessity, and kind of what brought you to where you are today?
So really just going back to the early days, coming from a poor family, it was my mother on her own. She literally had 3 kids at the age of 4 on her own. She didn't come from a wealthy family. There was no really external support. And I mean, there was always food on the table, but there was not much else. So I just always grew up saying to myself, how do I make some money? How do I keep things going? Etc. And it was always just part of my thinking, just to make money. I didn't want to be poor. I mean, obviously I wouldn't say I didn't want to be rich, but the aim was I didn't want to live where I couldn't afford things. And yes, always had ideas at the back of my mind of what to do and how to do things. And I was always trying different ideas. I used to sell stationery from door to door. I always had something on the go that was making me money. And whilst I was still at school, I used to write some computer software. I used to sell computer software. I always had a job. I was always working weekends, selling computers, which basically landed up becoming a computer business. And just to correct one of the things, the business was, when I was probably 18, literally I just left school, first year varsity, and I had this computer business. And it's an interesting story because I was very green, naive, knew very little about business. And someone came past, started buying computers, paying me cash, COD every day. And after about a month or two of giving me some really good orders, said, look, he needs 14-day terms. This guy was a fraudster. He caught me totally unawares. I knew nothing about it. And in the space of 14 days, and now we're going back to 1987, in the space of 14 days, he ran up a debt of 280,000 Rand, for which he had given me 2 post-dated checks. I still have them to this day for 140 and 142,000 Rand. The checks, I've got them to this day, and they say bounced on them. So
have you framed those checks? Have you got them up as a reminder?
You know what? I actually should. I should do it. I should actually. Funny enough, I'm one of those sentimental types. I keep everything. I've got boxes and boxes of just different things and different experiences we've got, and I actually should get them out and post them up. But effectively, I was taken for 280,000 Rand at the age of 18, green in the business. And it would have put most people, out of business. It would have put them in the gutter. I went to 3 attorneys at the time. And the first attorney said, well, you're a man of straw. You got no assets. Just put yourself into liquidation. There's nothing anyone can do. I went to the second attorney, asked him for his advice. He said to me, you're a man of straw. You own nothing. Who cares? Just put yourself into liquidation. There's nothing you can do. And the third attorney, an attorney by the name of Earl Friedman, he now lives in Canada, and on the odd occasion I still speak to him. He said to me, no, we're going to make a plan and we're going to do something to clear your name, etc. And effectively what I did out of this adverse situation, here I had a company that I owed them 250,000 Rand that I couldn't pay. And out of that, I created another business, because what I did is I said to them, I would then help them repair all their products that they were selling, and they were having problems out in the market in lieu of my debt. And basically out of that, I actually took that situation and built up a repairs business, founded on the back of a loss. At the end of the day, I cleared my debt with them and basically landed up with a viable business at the end of the day. So it was really a question of taking an adverse situation and really making lemonade out of the lemons. And true to form, I mean, if anything, if I did want to, I didn't have any assets. No one could have, they couldn't have done anything, but I did come out of it stronger than I had ever been before. And
so two questions with that.
Yeah.
So number one, you didn't have a father figure as you grew up. Where did those ethics come from that enabled you to say, hang on, I'm actually going to pay all my debts back, although I could just say, listen, it's the business, and let that go? And second of all, where did that inner strength come from, that belief to say, I can actually get through this?
You know what, it's a good question. I suppose it was just, I always had a moral slant on life. At that stage, I wasn't very religious, but I was a lot more religious than I am now. And I always just believed in the good of people. Growing up, for me, being happy with the people around you, and for those that know me, and I see a lot of names and faces over here that know me, Hi guys. You know, I'm a social person. I like to be around people, etc., etc. And I just thought to myself at the time, if there is a way to get out of this, if there is a way to turn things so that I don't have to, you know, imagine starting business at the age of 18 and you've already got a record of having gone bankrupt or whatever it was. And I think that was quite an important thing for me. I mean, at that stage of my life, I was very influenced about how people thought of me and how people saw me. You know, and obviously that is a big part of my life. You know, you want to be recognized for being a good guy as such. And that was really what I did. And as I say, spoke to 3 attorneys, and the one attorney said, come on, we're going to do something about it. And we really worked hard to find a solution to actually repay the debt. And the truth be told, at the end of the day, I had a nice business that I created out of really paying off the debt. And also, I mean, I think 280,000 Rand in 1987 was a lot of money. It was certainly more money than I'd ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember what houses used to cost in those days? If we look for comparison purposes, I mean, it must have been a few houses, maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, I at that stage I was working out of the townhouse that my mother and the family of us, my family, my brother and my sister, we all lived in. And if I remember correctly, the price that we had paid for that back in those days was about 180,000 Rand. The price of the value of it. So, you know, it was more than a property. Certainly, see, I see a few people waving. Certainly more than cars. I remember my first car that I bought around that time was 25,000 Rand. So, you know, it was the equivalent of a good 10, 12 cars.
Wow.
It was a lot of money.
Yeah. And then how did you progress from there onward? So what did you do, and how did the idea come across and spark about the ATM solutions? Was it by chance?
Yes. So just to give you a bit of insight into that, the ATM solutions idea wasn't mine. It was actually my partner, Steve Clark. And basically I built up around me, I built up a IT business. I did computer repairs, sold computers, set up a networking business. There were a whole lot of services, etc., in and around IT. I'd also developed a business called Equitrack, which was a first in the country. What it was is that we had bought in a product from the States, which you sat on you went into legal offices and it would sit on their photocopiers and faxes and record every photocopy and fax that the firm made so that they could bill effectively for it. So I brought that into the country, and I had a couple of businesses around me. I then actually sold the Equitrack business. I sold it to a listed business. This was probably around about 1997. I'm not sure of the exact year. I then took off a bit of time to go travel, backpacking around the world, etc. And I came back and I still had my shares in all these other IT businesses that obviously we had people managing and running them for me. And then one day, Stephen Clark, who I knew from many years before, popped in at my office and he said to me he was looking to do this ATM business. And I actually thought it was a terrible idea. I thought, you know, we had 4 competitors in that business at the time, one being ABSA, F&B, Standard. I mean, you had the big, and NetBank, you had these big 4 banks. And I thought, well, how are you ever going to take on these banks? How are you ever going to do something and play in their space without them absolutely killing you? Needless to say, Steve was a very good salesperson, and he convinced me to come on board with him. He needed someone who knew a bit about IT, was a bit technical, etc. And the business was born. And we went through a lot of ups and downs. I mean, the business nearly failed a number of times when we started it off, from having signed a agreement for financing with a very well-known businessman in South Africa who then pulled the plug at the last minute. We had signed an agreement with a bank, and the bank actually couldn't provide us with what they had promised us. There were a number of factors, but through thick and thin, we managed to get the business up and get it started. And within our first year, we got out about 100, 120 ATMs, only to have our, to run an ATM, you need to have a bank that's connecting you to the banking system. And the bank that we were using was Sambo, and Sambo went into curatorship after we had been in business with them for about a year. And I always say, when you do your business plan, you sit down, you say, well, what if your stock arrives late? What if a debtor doesn't pay you in time? These are all sort of things that you can really work on, and you can come up with ideas about them. But when your bank that is your lifeline to your business, and each of your transaction has to go to another bank, and that bank literally disappears overnight, it's not something you can ever factor into your business plan. And once again, under that adverse time, Steve and I both came up with a solution which actually improved our business. So, maybe taking a lesson from that and the time that I was defrauded, right at the beginning, both times very lucky, or maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe we put our brains together, but we managed to actually turn a lemon situation into proper lemonade. And certainly we came out stronger after the fall of Sambo than we ever had been before, because we signed up with more than one bank. We created multiple banking channels, and it really just helped the business, just put it on a much stronger footing. And also one of the things that we did is that we knew what was important in the business. So when it came to negotiating or renegotiating with the new banks that we signed up with, we knew what was important and what wasn't, whereas they had never been in a business like this. So they quite frankly didn't know what the most important touch points were. And we were able to put together much better agreements with the new banks than we ever had with Sambo. But notwithstanding that, it was a very stressful time. We did nearly fail. And the truth is that if the banks had had any common sense, they would all just got together and said, listen, no one support them, and we would have been dead in the water. But fortunately for us, it wasn't the thinking of the banks at the time.
So let me ask you, with Stephen comes to you with this idea.
Yeah.
You actually think it's not a great idea, but you go ahead with it. What did you do specifically to make it successful? What was the thought process? Did you go through a business plan? Did you just start importing? What kind of, just talk us through, if you can remember back that far, kind of what was the process that you went through?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, because I mean, what we did back then was certainly not what I'd suggest to any prudent person going into a business nowadays. We literally, we signed an agreement for funding through a third party, a very well-known businessman, and we just decided, let's order a container of ATMs, and we had the ATMs literally coming through on the water. We had to make payment, and the guy reneged on his agreement. We needed to pay for these ATMs. We didn't know how we were going to do it. There were 23 ATMs on the water, or about to be put on the water, and we then did something where we literally went out and we went to the 3 Fs. That's fools, family, and friends. We tried to raise money from friends. They said no. From family, they said no. So we eventually found some fools. But no, certainly we went to friends and family, and we managed to raise money to bring in our first container of ATMs. And it was quite a bold move, because at the time, we didn't even know how the business worked. We didn't know how we were going to get it going, where we were going to get cash to cash these ATMs, how were they going to run, etc. And basically, we went for it. We went for it literally blind. And yes, we did. We had one bank had offered to work with us. Turns out that they, at the time, didn't have the systems. They couldn't actually operate our ATMs. And so it was very risky, but, you know, things came together, and we built up a good team around us, and we put the business together. But also, I mean, you know, I always say that, and this is an advice, you're talking about maybe some areas of advice to give to people. One of the things that we always did, or I always try to do, is I try to think out the box. So when I'm trying to strategize about something, I think about the most ludicrous possibilities, you know, and then you know, when you're trying to work out how you're going to run your new business, think of everything and anything that you possibly can, no matter how ludicrous, and then eliminate the really ludicrous ones and focus on the ones that are left. But I think coming up, you know, trying to think of ludicrous things really just opens up your mind, even if you know that they're not financially sound or business sound. Just put them down on paper, because it does get you thinking. And I always say is that when we went into the business, we did things in ways that the banks had never done. And one of the prime examples that I always use was cashing of an ATM. And you mentioned early on that obviously we enabled merchants who had ATMs on their premises to actually cash the ATM themselves. But where we were cashing ATMs, which was still a larger part of our network, we devised our own way, totally scratch. And I'll never forget, you know, that's right at the beginning of the business, we would go and we'd speak to the banks, and we're speaking to one of the big four the one week, and they turn around and said, you know, why would we ever want to work with you? We got the best cashing systems in the country. It costs us 2,500 Rand a month to cash an ATM. Next week, we had another one of the big four, and they said, well, you know, we got the best cashing systems in the country. Cost us 2,450 Rand to cash an ATM. You know, there they were. Wow, they've gone from 2,500 to 2,450. And I turned around to my partner, Steve, at the time. I said, well, we must be doing something wrong, because it's only costing us 1,200 Rand a month to cash an ATM. And basically, we had just come up with a different way to cash ATMs, which worked out a lot cheaper. Whereas they had taken an old legacy system and, you know, chipped away, you know, chipped from 3,000 to 2,900 to 2,850, eventually down to 2,500, 2,450. Whereas we just thought of a different way of doing it. And from day one, it was costing us 1,200 Rand per month to cash an ATM. The same went towards the way that we did our communications on the ATMs. You know, at that stage, all the banks, every ATM had a leased line in it, which at that stage, I can't remember, was 3,000 or 4,000 Rand a month. And we pioneered the first ATMs where we would have a per transaction charge. So you only paid when you did a transaction. So if you had an ATM only doing 1,000 transactions, you'd only pay a few hundred Rand for your comms. If you had an ATM doing thousands of transactions, yes, you might be paying a few thousand Rand, but it was just a new and novel way of doing it. And we spent a lot of time coming up with just different ways of doing things.
Okay, so your business model, you changed the business model on its head, really, and you made it affordable for small places to have an ATM, where before it would have been unaffordable.
Yes.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe the word isn't affordable, the word is also viable, because at that stage, you know, take a petrol station. A petrol station wants to have an ATM on their premises. Why? Means extra foot traffic, extra cash going around the forecourt. And take, for example, if you know you're on one corner and the corner opposite you is one of your competitors and they've got an ATM, people will start, because humans are creatures of habit, they'll start using the ATM across the road. Eventually they'll start using the quick shop or the forecourt shop across the road. Eventually they're no longer coming to you. So you need to keep up with them. But you know, the banks will turn around to these guys and say, I can't give you an ATM. Why? Because we've got an ATM across the road from you. We can't cannibalize our own business, and it would make it unviable to have two ATMs on opposite corners. Whereas we could put an ATM in, which didn't have to do the minimum the banks were looking for in those days with 5,000 transactions. We could put in an ATM at 1,000 transactions. It was viable. It was, you know, profitable, not extremely profitable, but it would at least enable the merchant to not have to lose business because, you know, the person opposite him had a value add that he didn't have.
So just from your story of bringing in ATMs where you actually didn't even know how it was going to work, you were going to make it work, and you had all these issues, and you spoke about issues with all your businesses from the beginning when you were 19 years old. I often come across businesses where they've got to make a choice. Do they push through with what they're doing, or do they cut their losses? How do you assess that situation of you come across this brick wall? Do I push through that brick wall, or do I do something else? How do you approach it?
So, it's a very good question, because, also one of the things is that in business you mature, and, I look at things very differently today than I would have back then. So, and it probably today, faced with the obstacles that we were faced with at the start of the business, I would have said, guys, let's find something else, something better to do. But that's only because, as you get older, your propensity, your propensity for risk does diminish. And, back then, I would risk anything to do anything if I thought that the payoff was huge. Nowadays, so I suppose I understand to an extent. We had someone who was going to finance us, and he saw all these risks and he called it off at the last minute. But I understand that that's an older, more mature type of thinking. Back then, we had nothing to lose. We placed the order for this container of ATMs, and we had put down the money. It was 1.5 million rand at that stage, and we had no option but to make it work. If the ATMs got here and we couldn't get them going, there was a lot of friends, family, and fools that we were letting down. So we persevered, but it really does. It really was a testing time. But I guess at the time it never felt like we were going to really not succeed. But I do understand how often, and I've seen it before, people start off businesses and it's tough. And you sometimes do get blinded that you're going to succeed, and not every business is a winner, not every business does succeed. But we just pursued and persevered, and there were a bit of stars aligned as well, and everything did come off extremely positively.
Great. But so yes, we're getting a couple of questions coming through on the chat. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take some of them if kind of they're linked to what we're talking about, and then at the end I'll open it up to questions. But one of the questions from Josh is, how did you go about targeting your first ATM location? Was it a thought out process or not?
Okay, so I'll go through that. I mean, our actual first ATM location was within Sambo Bank's premises. Obviously, that was a test ATM, so you really can't. I suppose you can't. That was a test ATM. Went up on the 23rd of February 2000. But I suppose that's not how we targeted. The way that we really targeted was, well, the opposite happened, is that we went out there and we started telling merchants that we could supply them ATMs, and the merchants understood the true value of having an ATM on their premises. So it was such a pull from the from the merchants for wanting ATMs that we actually couldn't keep up. And we didn't know which were going. At that stage, we had no clue as to what made a good ATM site or a bad ATM site. Nowadays, we'd obviously have a much better understanding if it's on a particular busy road or where it is, or ATMs in the area. You can do a much better analysis and an idea of where that ATM is, whether it's going to be successful or not. But there we had no clue. And our first 23 ATMs, well, the first one went out, as I say, to Sambo's premises. The next 22 just really went to the first 22 clients that we could sign up. Also, obviously, being within the Joburg and Joburg area, we didn't expand to Cape Town or Durban or around the country until a couple of months later. But obviously, we just had such an unprecedented request for ATMs, And funny enough, the merchants out there also didn't know whether we could actually perform what we had promised them. I mean, we were promising them, the world. Thank God we got it all together. Our caching systems, all our systems came together, and just we had a great team. We really did form a great team, and that was part and parcel of our success.
So if I take this, if I move it into kind of the theory about it, you're talking about a push rather than a pull. So you had the customers like, a pull rather than a push.
Yeah.
You have the customers asking for the product, and therefore the banks have to go with it. But if I go back to your earlier business, where even with the photocopying, and you were counting
Photocopies, yeah.
counting the cost of printing. So that might be a little bit easier to understand, but just take us through, how did that, first of all, how did you find the rights to that? How did you get the rights to that? Who did you sell it to? How did you sell it? And again, was it a thought out process, or you came across a product and you just kind of were you a surfer? In other words, you got on the board and you went with the wave wherever the wave went.
So that's an interesting one, because that was quite, I mean, what happened, I started off the Equitrack business, the disbursement tracking business, in maybe the early or the mid-90s. I'm not sure the exact year, but it was a thought out process. I got onto a plane and I went to the United States, and I went to Comdex at the time, which was the largest IT show in the world. And before that, I actually did quite a bit of homework. You get catalogs. I mean, it's thousands of people that were, it wasn't online in those days. It was physically, you had to walk up and down trade halls, and there were thousands and thousands of people with different products. Every aspect of IT, computers, networking, you name it, was available. And so I did my homework. And I found a particular product, which I then brought across to South Africa. But there was a lot of design in that process. So it wasn't just yes, the product, it could have been any product. I could have picked up on one of 20 products that I had earmarked, or I had, when I'd gone through they came up with these big, thick booklets of all the people that were going to be at these shows, and I obviously chose a few that I wanted to go see. So it was by design, but I could have chosen A instead of B. As it is, I landed up with E, Equitrack. And coming back to South Africa, I did a bit of research into the market. There was nothing like it at that stage. All the attorneys, whenever they made a photocopy, they'd write it in a little book next to the photocopy, and half the time that would never get captured. So, I remember going into places where they were, they'd have a billing of 5,000 Rand a month manually captured on photocopies and faxes on disbursements, which they'd be billing back to their clients. And we'd take that up to 50,000 Rand a month within the first month of switching it on. And the system was only costing them 20,000, 30,000 Rand. So these guys would be paying for it within a month at the best, 2-3 months at the worst. So it really was a value add to attorneys. And obviously I used a bit of my network. I found out friends of friends that knew attorneys. Our first large installation was at a firm called Moss Morris. Nowadays it's TWB. And that was really our guinea pig, or my guinea pig, since I was the one that installed every single device on every single photocopier. But also one thing that I did do in all the businesses, be it the ATM business or the disbursement tracking business, I'd always installed everything. So, when you grew, no one could come to you and say, it's going to take me 10 hours to install something, because, you can't BS someone if you've done it yourself. So once you've done it yourself, no one could come to me and say, oh, well, I can only install on 3 copiers a day, when I knew that you could do 6 a day or 10 a day or whatever it was. And that's important, I think, fully understanding the business. And sometimes people do get lazy, they come in, they try to hand over as much as is. You've got to get down and dirty, and you've got to experience it for yourself and to truly understand the business.
So was it a case that you saw a problem that needed to be solved, and then you went and you found the product for that?
No. So the opposite. I went looking for products, and when I found products that sounded exciting, I went back and said, is there a need for this product? And I remember at the time of looking for at setting up EquiTrack, I had shortlisted 5 or 6 products who I had actually got samples. I'd got information from the distributors, from whoever it was that I had to work with overseas in the States, because that's where I was sourcing from. And of the 5 or 6 that I had narrowed it down to, this was the one that I thought had the best opportunity, could work well. There was a need for it. It wasn't being done in South Africa, etc. And the truth is, EquiTrack today is still running in South Africa. It's a viable business. It's doing very well. I eventually did sell it, but yeah, it was a great experience. It really was a fun time. And that's another thing. Just have fun when you're working. And listen, it's always easier said than done, because it's easier to have fun when you're making money. A bit more difficult when you're battling to pay the bills. But you do need to keep things fun. You do need to enjoy it.
So Steve Covey says, start with the end in mind. And was your end in mind selling the business when you started it, or was your end in mind just to earn money in some way?
No, so funny enough, my end was never in it to sell the business. What I liked about EquiTrack itself is that it was an annuity business. Once you signed up a firm of attorneys, you would basically sell them the product on a evergreen. And it was my intent to build up because we just would say to them, listen, it's $2,000 a month or $5,000 a month. But I went into partnership with some other guys, unfortunately, who were in the legal markets, and my dealings with them were not great. It was a 50-50 deal, a partnership. There were 4 partners on the one side and the one partner on my side, and they tried to get me to go down to 20% because there were 4 of them, and it just became a nightmare. And eventually I sold it to them when they listed. It was not my intent. My intent was to build a annuity business. And just another very important thing, that whenever I speak to people about business, concentrate on the annuity. Whatever you're doing, how do you build some part of it into a recurring revenue? So if you sell someone a phone for R1,000, you want to make sure that every month they're paying you 15 Rand for maintenance or for service. Just think about what can you do to create the ongoing revenue, because it's just so much easier to collect money than to go out and try to find money to earn money. Yeah.
Great. So this leads into what my next question was going to be. So today's Rowan Swartz is talking to a copy of a Rowan Swartz who's 18 years old, not exactly Rowan, someone, and comes to you and says, Rowan, please give me the 5 things that I need to do if I want to be successful in business, or give me the 5 things so that I don't want to be poor. What are those 5 lessons? So the one we can take is the annuity. I think it's fantastic. So give me number 4.
So certainly, I'm trying to think of 5. Unfortunately, you didn't tell me my homework before this thing. Otherwise, I would have become prepared. But yeah, so certainly let's understand that annuity and ongoing revenue is key and paramount in any business. Otherwise, each month you're opening up on the 1st and you're starting off fresh. Whereas if you've got annuity, it's a different story. That's very important. The other point that I made earlier on was the point about think as broadly as possible. Think as broadly as possible. So, I mean, here we have a pen, and I'm going to make a stupid example, but let's say you're selling pens what can you do? You can sell it as a weapon. I don't know, whatever it is. It sounds ludicrous, but if you let your mind just expand, you often then think of things that out the box that you wouldn't have thought of. Yes, selling a pen as a weapon to protect yourself in South Africa is not going to help. But certainly, if you think of some ludicrous things, you're going to come up with something different with a pen that you're going to help market it. So I always say, just let your mind run and think of different ways and different things, and you'll see how it does expand. Another thing that I believe, and this is not something that I went through, is because I certainly didn't have a business mentor when I was starting off my businesses. Yes, I mentioned there about Earl Friedman, who helped me when I was 18 and my back was against the wall. But actual business mentors, it's important to have business mentors or person to have someone that you can bounce something off. So especially in business, it's nice to have an alternative thought, even if it's an opposing thought to where you're thinking. I think that the business should go left. And this is what often makes a good partnership. If your partner's saying, no, I think it should go right. Because somehow, if you take then a bit of the left and a bit of the right, you'll come up with something else that is much better than if you're just on the left on your own or the right on your own. And over the years, I've worked with people that certainly when you tell them something, someone says go left, I say go right, and then you see when the person they implement something in between. They take the best from your idea, the best from their ideas, and that for me is so important. So listen to other people, even when you think you're right or you're right. In my knowledge, no one ever on their own can make consistently decisions that are 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. At best, a good businessman is making 7s and 8s. But when you put two good people together that are both consistently making 7s and 8s, the putting their ideas together, that's how you get 9s and 10s. No one on their own can just call it right every time, etc. So that I think is important. If you have a partner and your partner doesn't have to think the same as you, but that can add a lot of value, that's important. Or a mentor or someone that can just give you an opposing view, and you can use that and let that stimulate your brain to think in different ways of doing things. Goes back to my second point, thinking of things in different and unique ways. I think I'm on number 3.
I've got down to number 5, to be honest, but go ahead.
but certainly, so I just think that, and along with that is, don't be too egotistical to think that you're the only one or the best on the block, because you're not. People come to me and they say, I'm the best salesman ever. You know that they're not, because there's hundreds of best salesmen ever out there. They really are.
How do you approach failure? Does failure, you try something, you fail, do you feel terrible inside? Do you feel it's water off a duck's back? Do you feel it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? What's your take on failure?
So I guess that there's a couple of aspects. I mean, no one likes to fail, and failure can obviously bring us down. It can demoralize us, set us off in the wrong direction. And certainly in business, when you're in a business and you hit too many obstacles, eventually it makes us feel like giving up. And, going back to talking about some of my experience, as much as we were having failures in the early days of the ATM business with how we were going to do things, being let down, etc., every time we overcome one of those, every time we managed to overcome one of those areas of failure, the beauty about it is then we felt like $1 million. And you've got to understand that any business is going to have lots of challenges. There are going to be failures. Businesses don't work on like they do in spreadsheets. I mean, businesses worked in real life like they do in spreadsheets would all be billionaires. And things are generally more difficult out there than what we feel. But nevertheless, don't give up. You've got to try to find out a way about it. And also you've got to, once again, think out the box. If there is a block, if there is a mountain in your way, you don't have to go through the mountain or over the mountain. You can go around the mountain, or you can turn left and go into the valley, or whatever it be. Just consider your options at all times, and just try and not give up. But there are, and there's new businesses that I've, over the years I've invested in a lot of smaller businesses, startups, etc. And it's harrowing. Very difficult to get startups off the ground. Very difficult to get them going. Another thing, maybe just to add, is it's easier, and I mean, people know this, it's easier to sell extra to an existing client than to bring on a new client. So always take your existing business and see how you can expand with the clients that trust you. And I think that's important. So if, once again, if you've got someone and you're selling them pens, try to sell them a contract for their pens, a maintenance contract, something else, try to sell them pencils. As opposed to going out and finding new people to sell pens to. Work your client base, because those are the people that trust you. Those are the people that are working with you. And when I do mentor people, that is something that I often try and get people to understand. How do you improve what you're doing already good, as opposed to just, looking for something, new clients, etc. Because everyone always comes in, how do I get new clients? How do I get new clients? That's the first question that people ask. And the question is, well, how do you take your existing clients and get more out of them? It's generally easier, and it's an easier way to grow a business. Yes, you do need to take on new clients, but also if you're successful with your clients and you start offering them more services, by word of mouth, you're going to grow your business at the same time.
So Brian Joffe once said, in a talk similar to this, he said, anybody who tries to start a new business is crazy. He says he'd rather buy a business. He knows it works. He'd rather pay that extra money because now it's been successful. But coming from your side, if somebody says to you, Rowan, I want you to help me start a business, or I want you to buy into my business, what are the key things that you look at, okay, this is a green light, and what are the few things you look at that says, this is a red light? So this makes it a go, this makes it a no-go.
Yeah. So maybe let me first of all go back to the quote that you said of Brian Joffe, because, as I say, as you mature in business and you have a few successes and you build up some sort of capital base, it's definitely easier to buy a business and grow a business than to start a business from scratch. And Brian Joffe is a phenomenon. And he does have a recipe. He's done it time and time again. We all know the success of it. And there is a recipe, and it actually is easier to create value out of take something that's worth 10 to take it to 100 than it is to take something from 0 to 10. Notwithstanding that, just going back to your second part of the question, when someone does come to me with a business, and once again, I said it earlier on, people come to you with spreadsheets. And they say, well, if I've got one client, I'm making 100 Rand. As soon as I've got 1,000 clients, I'm making 100,000 Rand. It's true. But how do you go from one client to 1,000 clients? So, I mean, often what I do is I need to actually test the assumptions. And I'll give you an example, like exactly what I said there. A guy came to me, he's got this product, it's very easy to sell. As far as he was concerned, takes 5 minutes. He'll start off with one guy at 100 Rand a month. He'll get up to 1,000 guys. He's making 100,000 Rand a month. I then broke it down with him. I said, okay, so let's work it out, each client. And I don't remember the exact figures that I said to him, but you say it takes 5 minutes to get a client. What is entailed? No, he's got to first find their number. He's then got to phone them. He's got to make an appointment with them. He's got to speak to them. Eventually, we worked out that just to pull on that one client would take him 4 to 5 hours. So you've got to understand that even if he had a 100% success rate, that meant that he was signing up 40 people per month. To get to 1,000 people and earning 100,000 Rand was going to take him, 50 months. So often people overlook that sort of stuff in their business plans. They say, we're 100 Rand for one person, easy to get from 1 to 1,000. And then you actually sit down and you work out that it's going to take you 2 years in a perfect scenario to get to 1,000 people. And the business actually falls over before it starts. And that is a problem with looking at businesses on paper. You really need to break it down, and you need to understand what is the process. How do you actually get there? How do you get to 1,000 clients? And needless to say, I never invested in this particular business, and the person never got it off the ground, because after 3 months, I think he had about 12 clients earning 1,200 Rand. Even though it was an easy product to sell, when you broke it down, it was impossible. I mean, nowadays we do have the internet, and we do have other ways. I mean, I'm going back now to when you used to pick up the phone and make cold calls. But nowadays, there are other ways of doing things. And yes, a lot of it is being in the right place, a little bit of luck, and, hitting up thousands of clients or hitting up zero.
So what are those green and red lights for you? Let's look at it the other way around first. What are the red lights? What are the things that somebody comes to you and this is an absolute no-go? Then the second part, what are those green lights?
Okay, so certainly a plan that hasn't been properly thought out. When the guy comes to me and says to me, and I'll use that example again because it's a real example, I'll get 1,000 clients, it'll take me no time, it takes 5 minutes to get a client, I'll have 1,000 clients at 100 Rand in 3 months. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. The person hasn't done any thought. He hasn't put any true understanding into it. So those are red lights when a person comes and they haven't actually analyzed what it is they're trying to do and how they're going to get there. It is very different nowadays with the internet, because if you hit the right strategy and you hit the right marketing objectives, things can explode, but it is few and far between. I don't have to tell you that these businesses are few and far between.
Great.
So that's a big red light. And then, for me, I go back to the annuity. If you can't create an annuity out of the business, it's an orange to red light. Business needs to have recurring revenues. Otherwise, it's just too difficult to open up doors on the first of each month.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, let's go somewhere else a little bit. So I know you enjoy a bit of art, and I know you in the IT world. So we put these two things together, and I'm sure you've heard about Beeple. There's this piece of art that sold for $700 million. It's over R1 billion. So just your take generally, and that was sold through something called NFTs.
Yeah.
Which is the new way of selling art and ownership. So just generally your take on, first of all, cryptocurrency, if you have one. And sorry, I didn't give you this as homework. So.
No problem.
So your take on cryptocurrency, the blockchain, and NFTs. And do you see an opportunity there for someone like yourself or anyone else to make use of that in their businesses?
So, I mean, let's just talk about cryptos and the crypto market out there and what's happening on it. At the heart of it, I'm not, will cryptos and blockchain revolutionize certain ways that we do business? And is there fundamental value? Yes, there are. But I mean, there's 7,000 odd coins that are listed on these exchanges nowadays. At the end of the day, there's only going to be 1 or 2 that really create true value and have a fundamental value. The rest of them, to me, are tulips. People are buying them and selling them and speculating on them. So just to tell you, I got involved with cryptos a few years ago. They ran up to $17,000, $18,000. I sold as it started retreating. And recently I got back involved in them. And I'm finding that nowadays, there's a lot of hype. You talk about NFTs, there's a lot of hype about this. And I think that where there is hype, there's always an opportunity to make money. Do I think that there will be, so for example, payments using cryptos will revolutionize the payment industry. You know, you do a SWIFT nowadays and it takes 3 days for it to appear in the next bank account, whereas using a crypto, using the blockchain, it appears seconds later or minutes later. So there is great value. There is value in certain aspects, but you know, there's no ways that the world could ever have 20 of these different payment highways. It just wouldn't work. So, you know, there is some underlying and fundamental value, but whether that is worth the premium that we're paying on it, I mean, it's the same as if you buy a piece of art, you know, a piece of art, you know, value is in the eye of the beholder. And certainly, like, you know, you buy a piece of art, you buy it for investment's sake. I don't know where these, as a long-term investment, I don't know where all these coins are going, but there is money to be made at the moment. You know, I'm sure in the early days of the tulip boom in Amsterdam, people made fortunes. At the end of the day, people lost fortunes. And I think we're still in the early days. Just, you know, if you're gonna, it's speculation at the moment. Make sure you speculate with cash that is spare cash. But by all means, speculate and ride the wave, but just be intelligent about it. And yes, there will be some of these cryptos, some of these blockchain applications that are extremely lucrative, do revolutionize a lot of what we're doing, but certainly the majority of them will die in time.
Great. So I'm going to ask you one last question, and then I'll open it up if anybody wants to come in to ask questions themselves, and then they can, rather than just type on the group, they can unmute. So do you see yourself as a numbers person from a business point of view? So when you look at a product, when you look at a business, somebody approaches you, do you look at GPs? Do you look at net profits? Do you look at a ratio of something to something else? Do you have some key ratios that you look at? Or is it about the methodology, as you say, annuity income? Or do you look at those?
So maybe let me answer your first part of your statement. You ask, am I a numbers person? I'm totally a numbers person. When I was at school, I didn't like maths at school. I loved maths. Still to this day, next to my bed, I always have a book on maths that I'm reading about whatever, the latest equations that are being solved, something that's, I love maths. As a matter of fact, when I was at school, I wanted to become a pure mathematician. And the only reason that I didn't go, I mean, I did study pure maths at varsity, but I didn't become, was because I realized there wasn't much money in it. Although, I mean, nowadays there are these $1 million prizes for solving certain problems, pretty hard problems. I've tried a few of them myself, and you know, I'm not getting anywhere on them. But yeah, certainly when I was younger, maths, numbers was my forte. That I loved numbers. But what I felt when I was younger, you know, and to this day, when I look at a balance sheet, I don't look for specifics, but I get a feeling as to whether it's you know, you look at a picture, if you've got a good eye for art, you get a warm and fuzzy feeling about it. You know, you look at a couple of numbers and you get an overall feeling for what's happening in the business. You know, so I mean, over years, you know, you just look at cash in the bank, for example. Is it going up or is it going down? It's a huge indicator in a business. And I always felt that I could look at balance sheets, look at a business and just get a good feeling as to whether the business was a good business or a bad business. Listen, I've made many bad investments, lost a lot of money along the way, but thank God, made many more good investments, and the goods always exceeded the bad.
Great, excellent. So there's a question from Odette. In a business where the staff and management are driven mainly by salary, what are the dangers of the business crashing?
So I think that any business, you know, if you're the proprietor of the business, you got to understand that staff do not have the same incentives as you, and it's always goes down to incentivizing staff at their level, etc. I've often found that if you get the culture wrong in a business, and also, like, for example, if up at the top the owners of the business are fighting over something, it always permeates down into the business. So it's important that the heads of the business are giving a good indication of where the business is going and how they're driving this business at any time. Because yes, people on salaries can be fickle, and it's hard to obviously align them with the owners of the business, because they're just not aligned. Their idea is to earn a bit more, a bigger bonus at the end of the year, and get more holidays often. Sorry, have I answered the question, or did I miss?
I think you've answered it, but Odette, if you want to ask anything else.
Odette, you want to ask direct?
Yes, I'd like to know. It's a big problem, because when staff are paid and overpaid, and then there isn't loyalty back to the company that one expects. What does one do in a company that is already established, where the rot is setting in, where there isn't a common goal, there isn't enough teamwork, especially during COVID? It's really a difficult time. And how does one change that culture to be more positive? Please let me know.
So I mean, without giving you an exact example, I just want to point out and emphasize how important culture is, and how important it is looking after your staff. I mean, when you go to a lot of the big American listed companies and you see who are the top 3 or 4 people, you've always got your maybe your technical direction, your operations director, your MD, your FD, and then you've got next to them the HR director. I mean, people, it's important to place a lot of emphasis on making sure that the people are happy, etc. But as you say, sometimes you pay people, you give them more because you think you're going to buy loyalty, and all it does is it gets thrown back in your face. And I've had that many times. I mean, I go back and I've got stories of where my best staff member in a business was found stealing from the business because he was so good at his job. He worked out a loophole. He was, I'm just saying that this stuff sort of gets thrown back at us. I don't know of one single answer to your question, apart from trying to create a culture and breed a culture of fun, of loyalty, of trying to get people on the same track in the business. I mean, I've been in businesses where people are as fickle as I remember once we used to have a business which was a development business, and always found that programmers, they would shift jobs for as soon as they finished the next course and they could earn an extra 2,000 Rand or 3,000 or 5,000, they would either come to you, throw it in your face, say, listen, I can get an extra 5 grand from the next place, pay it to me, or leave. And unfortunately, that is the nature of certain types of businesses. So if that is the nature of the business for certain and I found it with programmers and developers, we had to really create a very strong backbone, knowing that our top programmers would always leave us. So, as much as we try to incentivize them, as much as we try to keep them together, we actually gave up in the end. But what we did, as opposed to that, we started creating an environment that when one guy left, it was easy to replace him with the next guy below. So, I don't know if that's a solution to keep people on board, but it's certainly a solution to create longevity in your business when those issues do occur. So I suppose it's a bit of both. Create and try and keep the right guys, but also be prepared for the downside of it, and maybe gear your business around that downside.
Thank you very much. I appreciate.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank
All right.
you.
We open to any other questions out there, but while we're waiting for the questions to come through, I want to ask you, just in a word or a phrase, if I give you a word, what's the first thing that comes to mind? So little game. Let's see how it goes. So if I
It's
say
like a
business
Rorschach test.
Pardon?
Like a Rorschach test without pictures.
Exactly. So if I say business is, what's
Business
your
is business is about making money and doing good. Just something which I like to always say is when you're trying to work out business, always think what's in it for the person across the desk. So it's business is about doing good for you and for the person on the other side of the desk. Otherwise, you're not going to be in business.
Right. Money is
it's better. Money is something good to have. It's better to have than not to have. Sure. Money,
okay.
Everyone says that, I'd rather be uncomfortable with money than, you know what I'm trying to say, but yes, money unfortunately can just create so many problems. I don't have to go into the issues that money creates for people. Too much of it, too little of it, you name it.
Right. And then people are?
People are different. Once again, going back to my first point in business, try to understand the person on the other side of the table. And one thing I've always found in deals, and this is maybe an interesting point because I've always found that there's always a soft point in a deal, which means a lot more than the bigger deal. So for example, someone's coming in and you're doing a deal with them and you're talking about shares and X and Y and Z, but there's a small little bit, I don't know, you're going to employ their mother as the switchboard operator. That's the thing you've got to look for in the deal to close it. There's soft things in deals that just make so much difference. And maybe I did, going back to yourself, also with staff, sometimes there's something very soft. It could be Nando's on a Friday. It could be, as I say, employing someone's mother as a switchboard operator. That's a bad example, but I'm just saying that there's something very soft that often can be bigger than the 10 million rand that you're paying for the shares. Just keeping the mother on as the switchboard operator can be bigger than the rest of it. So try looking deals for that little thing that actually makes so much difference.
Well, I think that's a very valuable point. And then I'm going to ask you the last one. Life is about experiences. So for me, I'm a little bit ADD. So I try a little bit of everything, whether it's riding my bicycle, playing my guitar, appreciating art, traveling, downtime, uptime, always just, a little bit of everything. And I'm certainly not an all or nothing sort of person. I've got a long bucket list, which I'm working through at the moment. Lots of things I want to experience and want to do in my life. And by the way, many things that I've ticked off on the bucket list. So go out and create that bucket list and tick off things. Make sure you tick off things. That's important. When we leave this place, it's you only leave with experiences. So do you have some form of routine that you go through? Do you have some methodology that you run your day, your week, your month, your year by? Is a to-do list something that you go through, even something as simple as that? So
I'm always creating to-do lists. I've always got a to-do list on my table. Each month I do a monthly to-do list. And I have, if you look at my to-do list book, it's all in color. I make it very visual. Different colors mean different things to me. Red means X, green means this, blue means that. And, I really work with those lists. And I found that it helps you concretize things, and it helps you concretize not only the good, but also the bad. When things are going bad in your business, You come in on a Monday morning, today's a Monday morning, you think, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. There's 100 things going wrong. Create a list of what actually is going wrong. You'll generally find it's 5 or 6 things, not 100. But when we sit down and we're faced with this huge, oh, everything's going wrong, concretize what it is. And this works. Work out what each of those things are and then work on them each individually. It's hard to sit at your desk and be faced with 5, 6 things that feel like 500 things, as opposed to saying to myself, I've got one little issue here. Let's sort out that issue. Next, we'll sort out that issue. So one of the things I do with my lists, and it's not only on the downside, but also on the upside, try to break things down, because things are much simpler when they're broken down. Processes, plans, business, everything is much simpler when you break it down. Even just, talking about my bucket lists, I used to sit down, well, I haven't done it this year, and last year it came to naught, but I would sit down in January and I'd plan times to travel, where I was going to travel, and I'd literally have a full calendar plan for the year of my travels. That way you'll get things done. If you don't plan, they're not going to happen.
Fantastic. Wow. So I just want to sum up with some of the things that you shared with us. I think I want to thank you for all this input. So first of all, if I understand correctly, what you're saying, number one, and I heard it come through again and again and again, is if you're looking at a business, it has to be annuity based. You have to find some kind of annuity in the business. You need to also think broadly. So you need to not look at the product itself, but look, how can you use that product in different ways, or how can that product be different? Good to get a mentor, somebody who you can bounce ideas off, whether it's a mentor or even a partner. Listen to the other people, which kind of links to that.
Yeah.
Think in the different ways. Try and expand your business within your business. So
Yes.
Try and grow the things within your business rather than trying to find new clients. Try find new sales for your existing clients. Always look at it from also the other person's point of view. What's in it for them? Look at if you're doing a deal or coming together with someone, what are those small little things, those what you call the soft things, that can have an impact on people? And interestingly, as important as all of that is, if you're faced with problems, face them, break them down into their portions, and then they kind of like smaller problems, and you can deal with each one of them in turn.
100%.
Is there anything that you want to add as a final message, maybe that I haven't added to this, or something else that you want to add?
David, it's funny, you've actually clarified quite succinctly a lot of my thoughts, which always go around my head, and probably I've never been asked to put the 5 down exactly like that. But yeah, it's really very succinct, and those are the key, are probably the key learnings that I'm taking from that I want to pass on to anyone from this discussion. So,
Rowan, I just want to thank you first of all for how you've changed the world for everybody with the ATMs. You literally changed the world, and I get a sense that other things are going to change in the future. And I want to thank you for spending the time with us and sharing these valuable lessons. And I think everybody can take something from it. And there's a quote that I keep thinking of. It says, "Who is wise?" And it's he who learns from everybody. And
100%.
we can learn a lot from you. But as you said, it's good to listen to others, because everyone can learn from each other. Yes. So really, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward one day having another chat.
Thanks very much. Thanks, David. Thanks, Tracy, for putting this all together. And thanks for everyone else that I see, names here, people that I know. You know who you are, all my mates. Thanks for the support.
So before we end off today, I would just like to thank David. Thank you for an absolutely superb facilitation.